May I please have everyone's attention? Before the meeting begins, we ask that everyone please silence your cell phones. The Fort Bend ISD Board of Trustee meeting is an open meeting for the public to observe the board conducting district business. Therefore, patrons may only address the board during the designated audience item section on the agenda. If you have printed material you want to give to board members, you must provide them to me or any officer present, and we will provide them to the board. We also ask that members of the audience be respectful of others by remaining quiet so that everyone is able to hear the proceedings. Thank you.
Oops, sorry. The time is 4:03 p.m. and this meeting is hereby called to order. We have the presence of a quorum attending in person. Notice of this meeting has been posted online and at the Fort Bend ISD Administration Building for at least 72 hours. Do we have any public comments? I understand we have 2 speakers. Okay. Okay, perfect. So the board encourage and welcome comments and input from our patrons. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes, and please refrain from mentioning a student or employee's name when voicing a concern or complaint, as board policy provides alternative procedures through the grievance process policies, GF local or DGBA local, to seek resolution to complaints. When you start speaking, I will ask our Vice President, Dr. Gilliam, to keep a timer for 3 minutes. Dr. Gilliam will announce when you have 3 seconds remaining. Once the 3 minutes time limit has expired and whether the speaker has concluded their comments, Dr. Gilliam will announce that speaker's time has elapsed, and I then ask you to return to your seat. May I have the first speaker, please? Okay, thank you. Thank you, ma'am, for coming here today.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. Can you hear me okay? Is it on?
Hold on.
That's okay, I can project.
Oh, but we need it.
It's on, I just have to get really close? Okay, I'm sorry. Are you ready? All right, good afternoon. My name is Cherie Kark. Forgive me, I'm going to speak kind of fast because I have a lot of information to cover in the next 3 minutes, and I'm here to advocate on behalf of Fort Bend ISD counselors. Speaking for counselors, right now, this year alone, they hired 15 new counselors. Of those 15 new counselors that they hired, they replaced 15 counselors that left Fort Bend in search of better pay for less days. We have 5 positions open. 3 of those positions I know were filled, and when they found out they would have to take a pay cut to become a counselor, they opted out. Now, the monetary information that I'm going to give to you applies to myself only. I cannot speak to the compensation of any other counselor. When I became a counselor in Fort Bend in July of 2020, I was a math specialist for the district. I made $66,000 plus my master's stipend. When I became a counselor, I was requested to work 8 additional days and offered $66,000, no master's stipend, because I was required to have a master's for my counseling. I initially took, if you look at it without the stipend, an $11.50 a day pay cut, which equated to $2,200. If you include my master's stipend, it jumps to $3,400. I'm sorry, I'm nervous. If you look at my pay today, based on the teacher salary schedule, if I had stayed in a classroom with my master's stipend, or even as math specialist, working my additional days, I would be making $76,000. I do not make $76,000. I make $72,000, which is a $4,000 difference. If you compare that with other districts, in Fort Bend, I'm at the midpoint. The midpoint in Fort Bend is $71,000. The midpoint in Katy is $81,000. In Lamar, if I was to go to Lamar, I would be making, I believe it's 74,000, but only at 187 days. So I'd be working less days and still making more money. If you look at the Fort Bend beginning pay scale for a counselor at 195 days, it is $58,000. That is less than a zero-year teacher with no experience. So I'm advocating for counselors. I know teachers need more money, so do counselors. Thank you.
Thank you for coming today. Really, we appreciate. If you have information, you can either leave to us or you can feel free to email to us. We appreciate, the board appreciate all the information. Thank you. I understand we have, yeah. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am, for coming today.
Thank you. My name is Melanie Blaine-Tanous. I'm a high school counselor at Ridgepoint High School, and I'll be speaking on behalf of the Ridgepoint, or not Ridgepoint specifically, but high school counseling, what I'm seeing there. We are understaffed, as she said, and overcrowded, specifically at Ridgepoint. We lost 2 counselors, replaced 1. We lost a clerk. And actually, we lost 2 clerks, but I'm replacing 1 still. We've been managing with 1 clerk for the past 3 weeks, and she's done a phenomenal job. But she is actually taking a pay cut to move to the 184 position to reduce her stress level. We are crying in our offices, literally. Okay, we are overworked, and our campus loves us and appreciates us, and we feel that, but we are just at our bare minimum. I have increased my caseload of over 100. We now no longer have a dedicated CCR. We are split with a CCR with Elkins, Ridgepoint and Elkins are the second and third largest campuses. So one CCR is manning close to 6,000 students, and they are not getting serviced. The students are not getting serviced. They need help with transcripts. We don't even have transcripts loaded. We don't know how to get transcripts to colleges for applications. And we don't have time to even do it and learn it because we're trying to man schedule changes and balancing classes and caseloads that are just too high. The state average for Texas for caseload is around 300, I believe, and 90. Mine is 550 plus. Okay. And that's, I don't even know when I pulled those numbers. On top of that, I do AP. So I am manning over 2,200 enrollments in AP classroom on top of that. And the stipend that's associated with that is not equitable. It doesn't give me minimum wage for the number of hours put in. It is just too much. We need more help. Our clerks need to get paid better so they'll stay and be better. I mean, we have the best clerk in the world, but we just need better overall and more support. 504 was taken off our plate, but not really because we're in transition, and the APs, it's given to the APs. The APs don't have time. And so we are going to be out of compliance. So you are going to have some problems with 504 very, very soon. Thank you.
Thank you for coming today. We appreciate all the information. Thank you. Yes, ma'am, you can start whenever you're ready. Thank you for coming.
I'm Dina Powis. I'm a lead counselor at Elkins High School. I just wanted to add a few things to what these ladies have already said. Teachers get a yearly step. Counselors do not. So there's not an increase of cost of living for us. If we don't get a raise, we don't get anything. I'd like to also mention about the lead counselor stipend. It hasn't changed in over 20 years. We make less than a department head for doing the same or more. And so our job keeps continuing to grow, and we are struggling to keep up. I haven't left work any day before 5:30, and I have been every day, every Saturday, since I've come back. Again, that's my choice, but it's the only way we can keep up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for coming today. And thank you for all who spoke today. And the board appreciate all the information. And we appreciate you working for Fort Bend ISD. We do. Thank you. So for the community member who are watching the board meeting today, unfortunately, we have some challenges for our IT. And so we'll not be able to project information on the projector. But if you go to the, are we loaded those? So we will load up all the slides to the website after the meeting. We apologize for this. I'm so sorry. So the next item we have is information item. So Dr. Wayback, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Thank you, President Day. Well, this afternoon, we're really going to allow Brian Gwynn the opportunity to share just a few important data points that we have shared previously, and then some responses to some of the questions that board members have asked to make sure that we are clear. I do want to take a moment and I want to introduce some additional people that are here today. Yolanda Young is representing Human Resources. She is Director of Total Rewards and Employee Development. And Rana Johnson with Advantage as our strategist consultant, and she's here as well if you have questions that may pertain to her. So at this time, I think, Brian, if you would start and just kind of give us a recap.
Thank you, Dr. Whitbeck. Good afternoon, members of the board. And what we have for you today is to, again, as Dr. Whitbeck mentioned, is to recap some information that we've previously shared with you all, but also to address some of the questions that came out of the board meeting on Monday to provide a little more in-depth information than what was provided during that meeting. And so to kick things off, you all have seen the staff recommendation that we presented to you all on Monday is shown here on slide 2. That staff recommendation is based on the 4-cent VA TRE and includes a total compensation adjustment of $33.1 million. That breaks down to an increase in teacher pay from $59,500 to $62,000. That is a $2,500 increase. That pay adjustment of $2,500 would apply to teachers, nurses, counselors, and librarians. It also introduces a differentiated teacher step scale at 5-year milestones, and we'll show you more on that later in the slide presentation. An increase in police officer pay by $5,742, $1.50 per hour increase for classroom aides and bus drivers, $1 per hour increase for auxiliary staff and non-classroom paras, and a 3% increase for administrators and business professionals, principals and assistant principals, directors and above. And then finally, it includes the addition of $2.5 million for safety and security to add armed security personnel at all elementary campuses. And this is a comment that has been asked of us since that board presentation on Monday from staff. This compensation adjustment does apply to all staff members within the organization. So there are no specific job classes or groups that have been excluded from this. This includes crossing guards, bus drivers, bus monitors. The whole gamut of staff is included as part of this compensation recommendation. If you go to the next slide, key topics for discussion. One of the things that we wanted to start off with and that we heard concerns about on Monday is special education funding options. And so as we talk about that, you may recall, if you go to the next page, you can see that there were 2 options that we presented that actually had recommendations for increasing SPED costs or increasing SPED expenditures. And that was in our 3-cent option where we had a $1.3 million increase, and then a 5-cent option had a $3 million increase. And I'm going back now to the key topics for discussion. So part of the reason that we did not include the increase in SPED expenditures in each scenario was for a couple of reasons. First of all, the state could potentially take action in an upcoming special session that could address some of the funding shortages that we're facing. And so we didn't want to get ahead of ourselves and overfunding this. And so we were looking at what would we need to fund on an ongoing basis that would include things like the additional staffing that would be needed to address the students' needs through the identification process. The other thing that I would highlight is that, as you all recall, and we indicated on Friday, when the budget was adopted based on the existing tax rate or the 94.92 cents, the district currently has a $1.4 million surplus. And so those funds are currently unallocated and are available to be allocated by the board through a budget amendment. And so if we get to a point within this year where we need to allocate additional funding to special education, we can bring back a budget amendment for board consideration to address those specific needs. The final thing that I would say on this, and it's still preliminary, but our fiscal year closed on June 30th. And you all may recall from the update that you all received that a large portion of the expenditures that we need to make for SPED are related to identifying the students, which are more of a one-time type cost. And so, again, our fiscal year just ended, but we are expecting to see some additional savings beyond what we originally projected that could be used for those one-time type items. And so, again, there are three ways that we could potentially address any special education funding needs that we have. The first one being state aid. If the state does not come through, then we could fall back on the $1.4 million surplus that the district has. And then finally, to address some of those one-time needs, we anticipate we could have some additional savings from how we ended the prior fiscal year, the 22-23 school year. And so the next item that we have for discussion is compensation pressure. And so since we've done our original presentation, we've learned that Lamar has actually increased their starting officer pay to about $62,000, with the upper end being at $90,000. And so in addition to that, we have the issue that we're facing with a bus driver shortage with about a 25% vacancy factor there. So the recommendations that we have address things at the time. If this becomes something that we need to address, and what I would say is that we have one piece of information from Lamar. We still don't know how other districts are going to respond, specifically on the police officer side. We do have, again, some flexibility within that $1.4 million that we could potentially use, but also the state aid component of that. If that's increased, that could be another option for us to fund those specific compensation pressures that we're seeing. If those are not enough, then what I would say is that if we want to do more for these groups, or a larger component to that, is we would potentially have to look at making additional reductions within the budget to make these adjustments. And so that's just something to keep in mind. And so as we go through the presentation this evening, you won't see necessarily additional adjustments, but it is something that we are cognizant it's something that we're going to likely have to address within the upcoming school year. The next item that you'll notice on here is the safety and security mandate. Currently, we have embedded within the VATRE the recommendation from staff that we shared $2.5 million to add armed security personnel at the elementary campuses. However, one of the things that will be needed in order to move that forward is contracts with external security vendors. And so you will likely see in the very near future that recommendation coming forward. What I would say is that regardless of whether or not the VATRE passes, that will need to be funded. And again, if it does not pass, we will likely have to look at making reductions within the budget elsewhere in order to fund this. And so that's part of the reason we're including it as part of the VATRE, is we do not want to make reductions that would potentially impact the classroom. So that's part of the reason for that, again, the need for immediate action on that. And then finally, there was some question as we went through the presentation about the breakdown of administrative and business professionals, and so we'll walk you through what that looks like as part of this presentation. And so now I'm skipping to slide 5, since we touched on slide 4 previously, showing where we had those additional allocations for SPED. So when we shared the information as part of the budget presentation this past Monday, this was the breakdown of categories for each of the primary groups, with about 54% of our staff being aligned with teachers, nurses, librarians, and counselors. If you go to the next slide, we've done an additional breakdown of those positions, and so you'll notice now we have separated out teachers and librarians from nurses and counselors. And again, the reason that we have grouped those together is that when the state typically mandates raises for those groups, they will do it on the basis of you have to do raises for all of those, and they don't allow us to necessarily differentiate. And so as part of that, we have broken them out, though, so you can see what that actual impact looks like. If you move down to the next group of italicized groups, it's the administrative and business professionals. We've done a further breakout of that for special education, administration, and campuses based on how those break out. And you can see what each of those looks like, and I'll go into more detail on those in an upcoming slide. And it looks like we have the presentation working. I think that's okay. Do we have the clicker so it may help? Oh, you're. The click stops. So now not only are you IT, it stops with you, the click stops with you. Okay, so the clicker is not working. That's unfortunate. If you can go to the advanced 2 slides. Here, back one, please. Okay, so from the administrative and business professionals, the way that broke down is we have a total of 321 positions that are categorized based on their pay group. That's something that TEA uses. And this is what that looks like. So of those 321, I won't read each of these to you, but can see, actually, Long, if you can go back one slide. I think you're one ahead of me. One more. Here, perfect, thank you. You can see what that breaks out. So educational diagnosticians represent 74 of that total going down. Each of those are embedded within the special education department. So 321 staff members are wrapped up in that categorization. On the campus, we also have administrative and business professionals. Those are going to be positions that don't necessarily directly interact with students in terms of the learning environment. And so you have athletic trainers, the head football coaches, behavioral health facilitators, et cetera, that are included in that. And so there's 61 of those positions in total that between on the campus side. And Long, if you can go to the next slide now. This is a breakdown of the administrators in the administration, and we've broken it down by area, and then I'll show you how it looks similar to what we did with SPED and the campuses. So of those positions, you can see 2 things. One, we're showing you what the head count was in 22-23, and then the impact of the reductions that we have gone through as part of the $23.5 million in reductions that we did. And so you can see currently, we started out with 348 last year. We've reduced that headcount by 37 through those reductions that we made, and we have 311 positions that are remaining. And so that represents an overall 10% reduction in that headcount. But you can see that the vast majority of those positions are in the academic affairs and organizational development area. Those are those who prepare the curriculum as well as train the teachers and do the plan development each school year. 68 of those are in the information technology area, 31 in business and finance, 27 in, I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong slide. Let me jump over. 130 in academic affairs, 63 in information technology, 29 in business and finance, and so on. And so again, these are the people that are providing direct services to campuses and serving the staff throughout the district.
Before Brian moves on from this slide, one thing I want to mention, because I've seen some of this and some comments, and it was talked about at the BOC last night in this very room. You know, the folks on this slide, you know, these are, you know, business types. Obviously, when you look at all of the, you know, IT below the first line, those are functions that are at all businesses. Okay, not just school districts, but at all businesses, and so. It's important to realize while we've shown some information on how our starting pay scales compare with other districts, what's missing from what you've seen, and frankly, you know, it's not information that's readily available, is what we have to deal with in terms of competing with industry. we compete with all companies, for the IT professionals, the business professionals, HR, and on down. Transportation, all kinds of logistics go into that. So anyway, we've lost many people to companies outside of school business. Recently we lost one of our communication directors. He didn't go to a school district. He went outside the industry. So we do lose folks to those, and so it's important to realize that this isn't just about pay with school districts. And so when folks say, well, this group already has enough, and they don't necessarily need enough, we do have to compete with others besides school districts.
Okay, so Long, if you can go to the next slide. This is breaking down the actual positions that are wrapped up into that prior slide. And so you can see within the academic affairs and organizational development area, there are 130 positions. 53 of those are coordinators, 23 are specialists, and so on. And then if you look at the other administration, and so that would be areas that are outside academic affairs. So this would include business and finance, transportation, purchasing, human resources, et cetera. You can see 35 managers, 29 supervisors, 22 analysts, and so on. The two that I'll point out at the bottom, you'll notice in all other. The all other under the academic affairs side is the district registrar. These are positions where there's only a head count of one. And so we aggregated those together. But the district registrar, compliance officer, for multilingual, child psychologists, and librarians and media specialists. And then on the other administration side, the 11 all others would be the public information officer in the police department, the police compliance officer, an accountant, internal auditor, HR business partner, finance monitor, district treasurer, and positions such as that. And so this is coming back to, again, what our staff recommendation was that we presented at the last budget meeting. Long, if you can advance forward. Thank you. This is the staff recommendation that we presented based on the increase to the teacher pay, et cetera. And then Long, if you can go to the next slide to remind everyone, what did that differentiated teacher step pay program look like? Again, it would start out we currently have a differentiating factor at step 5. It would maintain that. They step from step 4 to step 5, it's $1,000, and then it adds $250 at each milestone of 5 years. And so ultimately that would get up to those teachers, to get them caught up, that are at the upper end of the scale would receive about $7,000. And Long, if you can go to the next slide. This is the breakdown of the compensation based on that higher level of positioning that we had shown you, so you can see what the actual dollar amounts are. Again, about 70% of the total compensation is going to teachers, counselors, nurses, and librarians. 8.2% is going to classroom aides. Bus drivers are receiving roughly 2.5% of the total. And so again, this just provides an overview of what that looks like, breaking out those additional categories that we shared with you all. And then to wrap things up, the tax bill impact of what this looks like. With a 4-cent VATRE, the average taxpayer will have a bill of about $2,677. The tax bill under old law would have been $3,718, and so that would be a $1,041 reduction to their tax bill. And if the TRE is not successful, the tax bill would be $2,569, or about $1,150 in savings. And so essentially with the passage of a VATRE, we would be offsetting the savings that a taxpayer would see by about $108. But again, the bottom line is the average taxpayer will see a savings of over $1,000 if this is successful. The comment was also made, and I can't recall, I believe it was at the BOC as well, if you increase these folks' salaries and you're simultaneously increasing their tax bill, you're just cutting into the amount that they're getting as part of their paycheck. And so again, the additional amount that they would be paying each year is $108. All of the raises that we are doing are in excess of that, well in excess of that. And so, yes, they would be paying a little bit more on their tax bill. However, they would be receiving in excess of what they're paying back in their tax bill. So I did want to clarify that, yes, tax bills will will not go down as much as they would have otherwise, but that offset is more than made up by the compensation package they are receiving.
And Mr. Gwynn, that's based on a property price of $370,000. So if you were less than that in your property, it would be less. If you didn't own property and you were leasing or renting, then that would be a moot point for you. So it kind of depends on the situation the person's in.
Each individual's tax bill will adjust. That's why we do emphasize this is an average tax bill, not what everyone will see. But on average, if you look across the district, $370,630 is the average valuation of a home in Fort Bend ISD's tax boundaries. All right, and that concludes the information we have presented, and we're prepared to answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you, Mr. Guan. So I'm going to open for discussion. Do we have questions? We'll have to raise your hand if you want to ask questions, since we don't have the button today. Nobody has questions? Okay, okay. Ms. Hannan.
You're in listening mode. I wanted to be in listening mode.
So, thank you, Mr. Gwynn. So, I wanted to just clarify, because you mentioned something about if there is increase in state funding, we could, utilize that to address special ed, I think is the topic you were talking about. So that's my first, what's the likelihood of that happening? And we're being recorded.
And I
so.
honestly wish I could say. So what we have heard from various sources is that after the Attorney General impeachment trial is concluded, there will likely be a special session called either at the end of September or early October. It will more than likely cover vouchers. And of course, if you recall from the original session, the Senate attached vouchers to an increase to the basic allotment, basically saying if you want an increase to the basic allotment, you must accept vouchers as the compromise. And so, again, what that may look like, we don't know. The last time that they originally presented that, it was a $100 increase to the basic allotment. That's not a tremendous amount of funding, but of course, every little bit helps.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. And then, can you clarify what you were saying about the legal requirement from the state about increases for teacher salary and counselor salary? And are you referring to if that was a state mandated raise? Help me understand your point you were making there.
So when House Bill 3 was passed during the 2019 legislative session, one of the things that it mandated is anytime the basic allotment increases, you have to use a portion of that increase on compensation for teachers, librarians, nurses, and counselors. And so part of our planning purposes is we always view it as if the state mandates something, they will include those positions together. And so that's part of that. So to address the second part, if the state were to increase the basic allotment by $100, they would mandate that a portion of that be, right now we are mandated a portion of that be spent on compensation. Right now it's 30%. However, when they were having debate during the last legislative session, they increased that amount to 50% of the increase to the basic allotment would have to be spent on mandatory, and they say mandatory teacher raises, but by virtue of the way that the law is written, it automatically includes those four categories: teachers, librarians, nurses, and counselors.
Okay, and the VATRE is not under that. This is not a state mandated raise. This is this would be a raise, an internal situation. So that that mandate is not applicable to this situation.
Correct. But part of the reason that we connect them together is if the state does something, or if we do something out of sync with what the state might do, we run the risk of compression within that group. And you heard some of the counselors speaking earlier about some of the concerns they have between the difference between teacher pay and counselor pay is. We want to avoid further exacerbating that problem.
Right. And I think we kind of want to, I don't think we're going to address that tonight, but, I mentioned Monday, and that was 20 years ago, right? I lost 2 stipends, came in as a instructional leader in this building and lost money. And so that's an unfortunate but not an unusual situation, I'm afraid. Okay, and then my last question, can you please just remind me and clarify what are our nurses, let me see, our nurses and counselors, what is their percentage of raise, or is it based on that flat rate that teachers are getting?
That is correct. It would be the $2,500 that teachers are getting. So everyone is moving in lockstep. And again, that helps us avoid further compression within those pay groups.
I see. Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Nguyen.
Thank you, Ms. Hannon. Mr. Garcia.
Thank you, Madam President. Yeah, and I agree with Trustee Hannon. I know we're probably not going to solve the intricacies of how we're going to fund, the stipends for the counselors and raises for. I know that's a huge issue, and that's something that we're working on. And I know I talked to Dr. Whitbeck about some scenarios for bringing some things back into the fray. I definitely think that when you look at where we're at with special education and like when some of our counselors are saying they're really inundated, and that's a focus, and all of these things, it's a snowball effect. So it just kind of compounds, and the pay doesn't hurt or doesn't help. So I'm definitely support y'all trying to figure out what we can do in that area. When I look at some of the possibilities at the state level, there's an opportunity there. But then, as I mentioned on Monday, whatever the state does, every school district's going to do. So then if we don't pass what we're at, then we're already behind as it is. So if we don't get caught up and then we get a $100, $200 increase to the basic allotment, then there may be some opportunities there as well. But I think the purpose of this meeting was to kind of figure out how, or just kind of go into a deeper dive. I think, I was all in favor of kind of how we had it set up, because we had, like we said, Monday, month and a half to prepare and go through and ask a lot of these questions, and we. And when we were presented with the differentiated step, I think that's something that's definitely going to set us apart, and that's I think that's one of the priorities for me personally in special education, obviously, and I like the idea of taking that $1.4 billion surplus and applying it to where that's probably an area of need, and I know that's not something that we can necessarily use toward pay because it's a one-time thing, but there may be some opportunities there where you take maybe a portion of it and stipend it out or something like that. But so I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia. I just got a text message from Mr. Hamilton. He's stuck in traffic in Tambo, so he apologized.
Madam President, if I may, and I'm going to have to lean on Dr. Young. So I do want to emphasize one thing about counselors that complicates things, and that is several years ago, there was a Senate bill that actually changed the requirement for counselors. In the past, you had to have classroom experience in order to become a counselor, and they removed that requirement so that if you had the background to do it, and she can speak to the specific Senate bill that did that. But that complicates things in terms of, in the past, it would have been very easy for us to say, we're just going to put the counselors back on the teacher scale and move forward. And so just keep in mind, as we deal with those issues related to counselors and some of our other pay groups, sometimes changes legislatively make things a little more complicated than we would otherwise like.
Thank you, Ms. Guan, for that information. Do we have questions? Dr. Gilliam? Thank you. Ms. Jones? No. Ms. Malone?
All right, I'll bite. This has been difficult. It's exciting. Like, it's super exciting to be able to be in a position to add additional compensation for staff. But I feel, at least for me, and probably for you guys, but I'll speak for myself, it's been challenging. And so I want to address just a few things that I've said previously. And one of them, for example, was talking about what the published rate was for, let's say, a high school principal, and how I mentioned the 132, but in practice, we're actually paying in the 150s, which is great. And so that wasn't, when asking about it, it wasn't saying we should be paying lower. That's not it. It was, hey, we're actually doing better than what's published, and I'm glad to see that. And I think I want to say that's the same thing I heard earlier about counselors, and that was another one that I noticed a few weeks ago, where the published rate is approximately, what was it, 59,288 or something like that, 59,000 something. But in practice, we're not paying 59,000. We're actually paying in the 70s. So for that, I think seeing those things, it drove concern. And the concern was, if this isn't the practice, how can we address this to make sure that our practices are reflective to what's published? And so what I would ask, and I mentioned this to Dr. Whitbeck, is if we could please update our records so that our published rates are more in line with our current practices. Number one. And so with that, I regardless of whether you're, the bus driver at the start of school who receives the children as the first greeting, or if you're the principal who closes the building down at the end of the day. So the whole range, every single person is extraordinarily critical to the success of our kids' education and important. And frankly, I wish we could do everything. So with that, I want to say this, board, there was an email that went out today that said I asked all these questions, et cetera, and there's some papers here. And so with that, I want you to know the intent and then what the response. And the intent wasn't all of that. Here was my question. I wanted to know how many folks were newly hired or newly promoted within, the last year at the current market rate, because I was concerned that we don't have a recent salary study. And are those folks then also getting an additional 3%? And could that potentially be redirected for, let's say, bus drivers or special education paras? Because even though it may not be a significant amount of money, just from the one spreadsheet we got, it was over $100,000. It could be a quarter for a bus driver, which frankly could impact them and make a positive difference. So I just want you to know what the intent with that question was. So here's the deal that I'm really, really struggling with. And frankly, I think I've kind of accepted the situation. And I'm trying to find the joy in this, because this should be really joyous that we have the opportunity to present this to the public. So I'm going to ask our attorneys one question, because I think I know the answer, but I'm just going to ask. Could we do... So first of all, preempt that with, hearing about the counselors, that's not the first time I've heard that. And it's hard to process. Could we do a salary study? Is it even possible to do a salary study and then determine final allocation of funding in case we have any inequities? Or do we have to make the decision now, moving forward, and just do a salary study later on and try to work out our differences at that point?
For counselors?
For everyone. When I say salary study, because I noticed a few.
I think I can answer that. I think based on my past experience with salary studies, they're time intensive, and they take a long time for the entity that you engage in a contract with to complete it. And in a district this size, it would be very much so. So TASB is one of the sources that is often used in districts, and the district determines what all they want analyzed. So, for example, you can have your professional pay areas only, you can have your auxiliary only, you can have stipends only, you could say all. And the price for the study is dependent upon how many people and how many, basically movements within that study it would take for them to bring the information back. But I would just be honest with you, based on, there's no way we would, even if we engaged next week in a contract, we would have something back by the time that voters would vote. And as you and I talked, I think a salary study can be a great thing. We're not opposed to doing that, but we just have to have the money to do it, and then the money to respond to it. And so all that is kind of pending, and the VATRE certainly helps with that.
Thank you. Again, in a perfect, at least for me, in a perfect world, that would have been done in advance, but it wasn't. And so I guess what I'm trying to hold on to or position my mind at ease is we're doing the best we can with what we have, and that continuous improvement is incredibly important. And I remember previously last year, we were in the same kind of, well, not even the same. This is a significantly better boat. It's not even a little boat anymore. We were in a little John boat before, and now I feel like we've gone up in step to maybe a big old ship, because $35 million is a heck of a lot of dough. But before, when we were in the John boat, we went and did everything safety related, and some people were upset about it, and we said, listen, we're going to do what we can with what we have right now. And so what I'm saying, folks, is that you got to do the best you can with what you have. And I think with this $35 million, a lot of it is going in a lot of hard to fill spaces. And I just hope that we continue as a community prioritizing education and public education here in Fort Bend. And to the counselors, you guys are doing so much good work. And I know saying it's a heart of service isn't enough, but we really do value you. And I'm sorry if there's any point that you don't feel valued at all. And I know you're hearing the stories of the kids. And I mean, heck, I got an email today that just hurts. Mm-hmm. And y'all are hearing it every single day. So thank you for what you do, and I wish we could do more. But with that said, I support administration and the recommendation.
Thank you, Ms. Malone. Ms. Hannon, please.
Yes. I want to reiterate what I said on Monday about thanking our staff for answering questions, because I know I've asked a lot of questions and you answered them all over the past many weeks that we've had to process this information. And I also want to recognize, Ms. Malone thinking about something like a salary study. And I think that as this board moves forward, and again, everybody doesn't realize we don't get to sit around talking to each other, having coffee, all 7 of us. This is our coffee talk time. So I think as we're moving forward, thinking about establishing the new goals for the district or the superintendent and the KPIs that we want to fall under those district goals, I think that we need to really be reminded of this conversation that we're having, and whether that's a salary study, or I don't know if that comes under an equity audit or some other kind of financial audit. But those are things that we should look at. I appreciate Dr. Whitbeck's response, because I think it's very important that we walk away from this today, because November, the November election will be here in a blink of an eye. Time moves very quickly, and when we walk out of this room today, I hope the public and the board has a sense of, we're on the same page and we're in agreement with where we're going. I do support the idea of using the 1.4 surplus that we have to focus on special ed, since we didn't get the win with the extra penny. But anyway, I guess I'm just trying to sit here to be the cheerleader that we walk out. I know not everyone maybe feels like as big a winner in this VATRE if it passes as others, but I still take it as a very big win if our voters come out and support this district with this 4-cent increase. Thank you, Ms. Day.
Thank you, Ms. Hannon. Mr. Garcia.
Yes, I just have a quick question, and I'm not sure if this is for Ms. Smith or Mr. Brush, but in regards to like the ballot language, and with all that we did last year, calling it VATRE, 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 and then the community goes out to the vote, and it doesn't say VATRE on the ballot, it says Proposition A. Do we have to have literature that says VATRE on it, or can it say Proposition A on the literature that we're putting out so that folks know clearly that Proposition A is what we're trying to get passed, and that's what's going to be on the ballot? Okay, yes. Or some, yeah.
Okay. Sure
More than a
that
few
we have a
experts
few
here.
experts here, so I'm sure. So, Ms. Johnson, thank you for being here today, Ms. Johnson.
Sure, it's a pleasure. Yes, there is legally required language that the state requires on the ballot. However, the word VATRE is actually evolved from just simple TRE. And in terms of marketing or communicating voter education, we can actually simplify that to just Proposition A. I think the one thing I would recommend is that we keep the VATRE somewhere in the brand that Kim's working on, because the voters have seen it last year for 12 weeks. And so, we want them to be able to make a connection. Oh, yes, I remember this. But Proposition A is a lot clearer, a lot easier to understand. The ballot language is not clear or easy to understand.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you. I just wanted to, because I know that was a thing last year. I was like, what is it? What am I voting for? So.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Do we have, Ms. Jones.
I just want to say I appreciate everyone's questioning and working, and we're trying to do something for our teachers and our staff, because they have to afford to work for us, and that's what it all boils down to. And we have a lot of people leaving the district because they can't afford to work for Fort Bend ISD. And so, as I said the other night, this is a start. It may have not been a win for everyone, but just, be optimistic. This is a start. We may be having this same discussion about, surplus and what we're going to do with the money next year. So as far as that is concerned, just keep working and just, pushing for our teachers and our counselors. I guess we're going to have to really look at that, because counselors really work hard. And as they were speaking, I'm like, they're doing all of this. What about the mental health needs of our students? Who's addressing those needs? So I just want you guys to just hang in there and just, keep on working. And we're in this together.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Dr. Gilliam.
I'm going to say, does this work now? Is it just me or what?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Okay, I'm going to say thank you, and thank you to everyone who is an employee who came out today, as well as everyone around this dais, this makeshift group that we have here as far as the dais. Thank you. I had a lot of different things to say, but I'm going to wrap it up with just thinking about working in a school and working in a school district. This is hard work. This is hard work from the top to the bottom, from the bottom to the top. And I just want everyone who is in Fort Bend ISD, who works in Fort Bend ISD, that I truly appreciate your time and your commitment to our district. We are a wonderful district, and we have had some employees, some sisters of mine, brothers of mine, friends of mine that have chosen to go elsewhere. And the counselors that spoke today, thank you so much. You reminded me. Okay, because I'm going to talk a little bit about being the principal of a high school, okay, because that's what I know. I'm not that anymore. I'm retired, okay, but I'm still out there in the schools, and it's hard, and it's harder now in these last 5 years. It's tough because there's so many things that we have to do and we have to prepare for, and we have to make sure that our students, number one, are safe. But in thinking, I hear you how many hours that you work behind the scenes. And the thing is that you have so many days, but you're actually, summertime, if you're in middle school or high school, you're still working on master schedule and everything else that's going on. And they do it. They take it home. You take it home and you do it. And so when I think about a high school principal, y'all, that high school principal, and so that I won't just keep going on, it's a hard job. They are the CEO of their campus, and it's lonely at the top. Because when somebody gets in trouble on that campus, let me see, Dr. Mensa is going to come after the principal. He's not going to the person who got in trouble or the person who sent that text or any of that. The first thing he's going to do is go to the principal. And the principal doesn't know anything about it. And then the principal loses sleep, starts calling people, trying to figure out what is going on and how do I get out of this mess? Because I didn't do X, Y, and Z. It's lonely at the top, and the buck stops here. And there's an old saying that when the principal sneezes, everyone gets a cold. And that's Todd Whitaker, if you'd like that reference. Then we have sometimes the audacity to think, well, why is Lamar taking our people? We got to pay our people. It's time. Now, I've been here sitting on this board going on, I guess, 3 full years now. And constantly, I see all of the good work that is going out there. And one thing about this board, we do go to campuses. We do go to games. We do go to events. And we see the principals all the time. They start in the morning. They go through the day. To this day, and I'm just going to talk about Shirley, to this day, it's still hard for me to eat lunch because I've gotten so used to not eating lunch. Because at lunchtime, I was in the cafeteria, and I was pushing a trash can. And people would look, why are you doing the trash can? Well, I was taught by Billy Polk at Willow Ridge High School, you push the trash can so you can pick up all of the trash just in case there's a food fight. There's nothing on the table. But the other thing that I found out when I'm pushing that trash can, I get to talk to kids, and teachers get to see me, and the staff gets to see me, and it's servant leadership. And it's not about me. This is about what principals do each and every day. And I thank you. I thank assistant principal, counselors, teachers, everybody on the list. And I'm one of those people, I like to go the positive, and the positive right here. I wish we could give more. But I want to thank you all because you all have really, really worked on this. And I just want to throw out there and thank you for those who came up to speak this afternoon. They ought to give y'all a stipend just for that. And thank you, Mr. Fickle. We go back way, way, way back. And I thank you for being here. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Dr. Gilliam. I have a question. So for the slide, on my slide is page 10, which is the staff recommendation based on 4 cents VATRE. Yes, this one. So please correct me if I'm wrong. I thought for 4 cents we get $35 million minus $500K compression. Is that correct?
So with a 4 cent tax increase, the number that you saw, 35 million, yes, that is correct. It actually works out to about $35.2 million in total. And so the recommendation we're making is $33.6 million. Through rounding, that will all come out on the wash in the end. We have $35 million in revenues, $35 million in expenditures.
Can you, so it's 35.6. So it's already, you already put into consideration of so-called compression, or, I'm sorry, I didn't really, recapture, sorry.
Okay, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am. Related specifically to that, yes. So we have, the revenues that we have shared with the board are net of recapture. And so we will not have to pay recapture on top of that. So in actuality, we'll generate about $36.5 million in total revenue, of which $1.5 million would be paid back in recapture.
Got it. Thank you. I just want to make sure those numbers are lined up. I'm sure it is. I just wanted to confirm that. Thank you. So I just want to say a few things. I think I wanted to echo with Ms. Hannan and Dr. Gilliam. Since this VTRE start a few months ago, discussion, the board asked, I think just for me, I saw probably around at least 100 questions from the board. And the staff really worked really hard to answer the questions. I think the reason this board asking so many questions, I believe, just like Ms. Malone pointed out, we just want to make sure to do our best. So Dr. Wayback, I think I heard few of the board member mention either do a salary study or compensation study. And also I remember Mr. Garcia mentioned we probably will do a cost saving audit. So I think those, not for now, but in the near future, maybe we can have a discussion to how can we do this moving forward, and so our people can get paid. And also we can answer the community for their questions. So I just want to put out there. So that being said, I have not a very good news to deliver. I just been notified. Unfortunately, we cannot vote on this item today because the action item was not posted in time because the law requires everything, the action item needs to be posted for 72 hours, but the action item for VATRE, unfortunately, was not posted 72 hours ago. So that being said, we can have information, we can have discussion. That's why I want to bring this to the board attention. If you have more questions, you can ask right now, because we are not going to do the action item for VATRE. We can only do the action item on the agenda for the TASB endorsement. So, yeah, Ms. Hannan, you can ask a question.
Okay, so if I can ask a clarifying question. Because we clearly took our vote for the 4 cents for calling to get this on the ballot in November. And so I just want to be clear that this requires a vote? Just this?
Yes, because
the allocation requires a vote. You can't do it by consensus?
To make an allocation that would actually be a binding allocation, the board would be required to take a vote. Now, as discussed at the last meeting, the board can allocate funds after the election. It could allocate funds at a subsequent properly noticed meeting, and any spending that would be brought before the board, ultimately, if the VATRE passes, would still have to be approved by the board. But to allocate funds and to assess the funds, the board would have to take a vote.
Okay, so this will have to just be, this can be on our next called meeting if it gets on the agenda in a timely way. Oh, thank you.
If I may, and I want to clarify this with Mr. Brush, but I believe I am correct. So with your consensus this evening, and just basically a nod, we can begin the process of publicizing to the community how we intend to spend the funds. We can bring back to you in the September meeting a formal resolution that spells out specifically what the intent is of the board. But generally speaking, we would be saying, here's how we we can communicate that out.
No, it would need to be the administration's recommendation. Of course, you've heard different board members make comments, but you can't draw a sense of the board without the board taking affirmative action.
So my recommendation moving forward, and just for everyone to know, I guess we're not really quite sure how this piece, I just found out about this literally after sitting down, how this little piece didn't work within the timeline and the other part did. But nevertheless, there's a lot of people working a lot of hours and mistakes happen. So if that's the case, what I'm going to recommend is that I work with President Day and that we find a time where at least the comments and a lot of the questions have been answered, and we find a time for the board to come in and just vote, if that's all right. And of course, any other questions they have, we can answer. But the reason that I say that is because, we have Ronna Johnson here, we have our Chief of Communications, but when we advertise and we begin to talk about this, the most important thing, people want to know exactly what will happen if they vote for this. What does that mean? Oh, it means it's $1 an hour for this group. It's $2,500 for teachers and a differentiated step. People want to know that, and I think we're making a mistake if we try to delay and we can't say, this is what the board has done. This has to be the board and the administration, not just the administration. It has to be a team. And so that will be my recommendations, that we find a time, and it be a very short meeting, hopefully, and that we can just solidify, and then the team can move forward with the messaging.
And thank you for letting me clarify that. So we cannot have consensus tonight, but just for the rest of the board, I'm still in agreement with what the administration brought to us with the 4 cents. Because that's the purpose of our conversation tonight. So I support that, and I also support using the surplus, which is not part of the VAT conversation, but it has to be because the 3 cents and the 5 cents addressed it, but the 4 cents didn't. So I just want my fellow board members to know that I do support the recommendation as it came forward Monday. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hannon. Like Mr. Brush, made a statement, we can really not give the consensus tonight, unfortunately. But if the board member have any questions, I think tonight is the time for the questions and the discussion. That way, I agree with Dr. Wayback. We should make another very quick meeting just for the vote. And so if anyone still have questions, we're here to have a discussion. So seeing if there's no more questions, we're going to move on to our next agenda item, which is the action item for a TASB endorsement. Can I have a motion, please?
I move the Board of Trustees endorse Rose A. Avalos, Aldine ISD, to represent Region 4 as a director, position A, on the Texas Association of School Boards, TASB, Board of Directors.
I second.
I have a motion by by Mr. Garcia and second by Ms. Malone. Do we have a discussion? Dr. Gilliam?
Okay, I have a question. Is this just one? Are we doing two?
It's one.
Oh, so either or?
No, there was
No, just-
two position A's. So
Okay.
I think we did last,
Yeah, so
we voted.
Mr. Garcia just made one nomination for one person. We have 2 people asking for our endorsement, and the motion is for Ms. Rose. Yeah, just for one.
Okay, for clarity, so there was an A and a B, or what?
No, just for position A. So right now, the recommendation is for Ms. Rose.
Okay, and so who is the other candidate?
It's
Right, I
Doug
see
James.
that. Okay, but there was
Yeah.
one other candidate. Was that for a different?
No, it's for the same position.
Doug James.
There is Rose, and then
Yeah.
there is,
Mr. Doug James.
and then the other young lady.
Miss Bro
Bro.
was from A-Leaf. Dr. Gilliam, that was for a different position.
That's
and
what
she
I was asking. Thank
She
you.
was the only
Okay.
person running
All right,
for
that's
that
what I was
position.
asking. Appreciate it.
Okay. I don't see any questions. We're going to vote by show of hands. Motion passes 6-0. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
The meeting is adjourned at 5:11 p.m. Thank you, everyone, for coming.